I bought every FPV drone you can buy so you don't have to, and I'll give you the pro tips, the recommendations, and hopefully by the end of the video you'll know exactly what you need to purchase. But I know what you're thinking, you can't buy every FPV drone. Obviously I didn't, but I purchased the Holy Trinity, which is what Joshua Bardwell says is the 3 best drones. I also bought Cinewhoop and a bunch of other stuff, so we'll get into it. And first, let's talk about the Cinewhoop. Okay, so starting with the Cinewhoop, basically it's a guided drone. I've talked about this before, and it flies fairly slowly, and it has one purpose only, well I guess 2, is to fly indoors and close to people. Because as you can tell, there's prop guards, so if it goes into a wall, it's not going to scrape the wall. If you bump into furniture, it's not going to damage anything, and that's the only purpose. So if you want to fly indoors, close to people, don't want to damage anything, this is the drone you should buy. But let's be honest, Cinewhoops are lame. They just fly around slowly. Why would you buy a Cinewhoop when you can get the Lamborghini of drones, which is like a 5-inch drone or whatnot? Long story short, unless you have that specific use case, don't buy this drone, especially if you're a beginner. You can't get the cool shots that you see diving everywhere. Well, you can kind of dive, but it's just not ideal. So let me reiterate, you only want to buy a Cinewhoop if you want to fly in a tight space where you can't damage anything and you want to fly extremely close to people, and obviously you don't want to hurt them. Moving on to the second type of drone which exists in the FPV world, it's the pre-built drone. So we're going to talk about 5-inch drones from now on. Obviously there's many different types of sizes, but the 5-inch drone is the key to getting the epic shots you see everywhere on Instagram, the rapid fast shots, the dives, all that good stuff, flips, tricks, cool freestyle. This is the drone that you need to buy. So that's why we're talking about 5-inch drones. If you need any other size, if you want a tiny drone, if you want a 7-inch drone, then you know already if you want to buy that, so there's no point talking about this in this video. But this is more tailored to beginners or anyone looking for the cream of the crop, the stereotypical FPV drone, the 5-inch. So a lot of people are tempted to build their own FPV drone, and it's just part of the community, part of the process. Some people enjoy it, it's therapeutic, and this is actually a custom built drone. However, I didn't actually build it. I purchased it from someone on Facebook Marketplace because I do not have time to build drones. I've got a full-time job. I enjoy flying. I can't be bothered building a drone. Look, each to their own, no judgment here. So who should actually build their own drone? Honestly, it's great for anyone who wants to get serious in FPV, because one day you're going to crash and you're going to have to repair the drone, and if you built it, you know exactly how to fix it. But that being said, I would not recommend it. Every pre-built drone is cheaper to buy versus buying all the custom parts yourself. If you're a beginner, building a drone is going to be a headache, and the most important thing that people don't really mention is that if you build a drone, you have to tune it yourself. Tuning the drone is an art in itself. Pro pilots can tune their drones really well. If you're a noob, that just adds more headaches, more trial and error, more time down the drain. And by the time you've done all this, built your drone, tuned it decently, you're going to be so jaded you won't want to fly FPV anymore. So honestly, just stay away from building a drone. If you crash it, you can learn how to fix it yourself. It's okay. So if you're someone who actually likes building drones and you want to have full control on the parts or whatnot, then this is for you. But if you want to save money and you want to save your time as well, then just don't build your own and buy one of the options I mentioned right now. Okay, so this brings us to the juicy part of this video, the holy trinity of drones. We've got the Nazgul Evoke, the GepRC Mark V, and the Diatone Roma F5 V2. And these are the drones that Joshua Bardwell, our FPV godfather, has recommended to us, and let's get into it. Let me just preface this really quickly with all 3 of these drones. If you gave them to me any day of the week, I can get some FPV bangers with all of them. So don't think you buy one, it's gonna be so bad or anything like that. There are some small differences which we will discuss in terms of price, in terms of build, in terms of durability, but let's get into it right now, starting with the Diatone Roma F5. All right, so the positives of the Diatone Roma F5 V2 is that, first of all, you can connect to the flight controller via Wi-Fi. And what that basically means is you can adjust the settings or your rates and adjust how this thing flies, all just using your smartphone. You don't have to lug a laptop wherever you go. And if you don't know what that means, basically, when you use your sticks on an FPV controller, you can change how sensitive they are, you can change how responsive they are, and it's really good to dial that in when you're flying so you can get the best control and get as used to the drone as possible to get whatever shot you want. In fact, it's the only drone that I mentioned out of the 3 that has this feature, which is really convenient. You don't want to bring a laptop to change your rates. That's just so annoying. Also, as a beginner, this is a pretty good drone because I would say out of the three, it gives you the best extras in the box. For example, it gives you so many different rows of different types of screws. If you're a beginner, you don't have these screws, you lose them, you'll be like, where do I get them from? This has you covered. It has by far the most extras, and it even gives you like zip ties. Like that's how good the styling package is from this drone, so that's another plus for it. This drone is also fairly light. Having a lighter drone is always beneficial. It can blip up, pop up faster, it can have longer flight times because it's more efficient because it's lighter, and you can kind of see the difference here when you put it next to the Evoke. There's just like a lot more stuff everywhere on the Evoke, so that's also a great plus. So you get more pop and it's a great experience. And I think the overwhelming positive is that this is the cheapest drone out of the three. With the Calyx Vista, which is the OG brain of the DJI digital FPV system, we also have the O3 Unit, which is the brand new thing, which is super clear and crisp, which we'll also talk about in a second. With the Calyx Vista, this is only $429 US. That is the cheapest option out of three, and it even includes a GPS, whereas all these other drones will not include a GPS. I don't know how it's possible, but this is very, very cheap. And FPV drones, you're gonna lose them, they'll break. It's always great to save money, so that's like an overwhelming positive. Now let's move on to the negatives of this drone real quick. First of all, the durability and the build quality of this drone is slightly suspect. A lot of people complain that the Diatone Roma V2 here has arms that tend to break, which I'm not really sure about, never happened to me. If we compare it to the GepRC Mark V, you can see just at the base of these arms, it's a bit skinnier here compared to the GepRC Mark V, and the other drone, which is the Evoke, has even fatter arms. So you can see there is potential for a bit of breakage, but they have tried to fix that over the years. I've never broken an arm, but as you can see here, do you see how the motor like really juts out over this little carbon fiber area? If you compare it to the GepRC Mark V, you can't even see the motor here. And here you can see the outlines of the motor. Because of that, what was happening, I don't know if it was a freak crash. It wasn't too crazy. I was going fairly fast. I scraped the ground and the drone just tumbled. I thought it was fine, but what happened was, because there's so much space hanging off, like I don't know if it was a rock or a stick, it dented my motor in here. It couldn't spin anymore and I had to replace the motor, which is something I wouldn't really expect to happen in terms of a crash and actual damage, because if you don't crash from like 100 feet and if you're not going like 100 miles an hour into a wall, nothing should break. So that is a bit problematic, but I guess overall this thing is super cheap, it flies pretty great, and that's not really a big problem at all. Lastly, I'll also say this drone probably flies the worst out of the three. This is really a nitpick, but I do think it has the worst prop wash out of the three. It's nothing to like be super detrimental that I won't buy it, but I'm just letting you know that when you have a bit of prop wash, it does shake a bit, which is not great, but if you fly properly and you fly with the right intentions, you won't get prop wash anyway. Small nitpick. One last kind of issue with the Diatone Roma F5 V2 is that there's no O3 unit. I don't know if Diatone wants to produce any more drones. Maybe they're done making FPV drones. I'm not sure, but they definitely don't have an O3 version of this drone. I see on their page they're moving towards like RC cars. Look, I don't know, but they have no intentions at this stage to have an O3 version of their drone, which is a bit unfortunate. With that being said, the Calyx Vista still works amazing for the majority of FPV pilots. Also, just super quickly, the Diatone Roma F5, the GPS is a bit not that great compared to some other options out there. It takes a while for the GPS to lock onto the satellite so you can actually have a proper return to home function. And that's actually not a bad thing entirely, because sometimes if you're flying in like deep bushes and like really close quarters, if the GPS actually kicks in, your drone's done for sure. It's gonna fly straight into a wall. So because it takes a bit longer, if you have the intention that you don't want GPS, you can just like quickly plug in, fly real quick so the GPS doesn't confirm or activate, and that won't happen. All right, now moving on to the Nazgul Evoke. This is the O3 version, but overall, I have a video on it already. It's an amazing drone. It flies probably the best out of the three. Basically no prop wash, only a tiny bit in certain situations. And I'm fairly confident that the shots that come out of this drone, because it's so smooth, flies through the air beautifully, it will produce great shots and no shots will be ruined. That could potentially happen on the Diatone Roma if I'm not flying perfectly. Obviously, if the drone shakes a bit violently due to the prop wash, you're going to get some type of micro jitters in your footage, which isn't great. The GPS add-on on this drone, which you can purchase, is pretty expensive, but it works so well. It locks on really quickly. This thing is built like an absolute tank. It's got the thickest arms out of the three. very beginner proof, and it's just a great drone. The only real bad thing about this drone is with these side plates and all this extra stuff, it's a bit heavy. So if you want to be a freestyle pilot doing all these flips, tricks, getting all that pop and doing cool stuff, it's going to be a bit heavy if you have a GoPro on top, but this is an 03 air unit, so you should be able to just film that already by itself. So never fear, it should be fine. Let's quickly talk about price right now. I don't know if it's a sale or something, but this is actually the same price as the Diatone Roma F5 V2 for the Calyx Vista version. So not the 03 air units version, but the other one, which is the same price, which is quite a great deal. The 03 version of this drone costs $600 US, which is fairly expensive, but there's also a version without the side plates, without all the fancy stuff, which is just a Nazgul for $540 US, which is the most affordable option. And if you want to go 03, I'd probably just purchase that. However, if you're a beginner, this is probably the best option. Super rugged, great drone. All right, so now moving on to the GepRC Mark V. This is just another amazing drone. It flies extremely well. I do like the actual weight of this drone. It's very similar to the Diatone Roma F5. It's got so much pop and you can just fly a lot more efficiently in my opinion. Goes super fast, and that's just kind of builds off where the Evoke is lacking in terms of that extra weight. It's kind of like you had the extra weight shedded off, and this thing absolutely rips. Great for freestyle as well, which is great. So due to the light build of this drone, you can pop a GoPro on there and you can definitely freestyle with this. So it's an amazing freestyle drone, which is great. It also has a very nice build quality. You've got these aluminum plates at the front so that I guess you don't dent the camera when you crash and whatnot, and it's just generally built very well. There's only two potential slightly bad things about this drone, is that I don't think it flies as well as the Nazgul Evoke. It's just a touch more prop wash when you come down, a little bit of wobble whatnot. I'll put it in a video, but personally it wouldn't really bother me at all. I think the stabilization would be able to take care of that, so that shouldn't be a problem. And I think the biggest problem is that it's just a bit expensive. For the Calyx Vista version of this drone, it's $486. That's an extra $50 US more than the other two drones in the Calyx Vista versions. To the Americans, it might not seem like a lot, but the currency is too strong these days. In Australia, this would be an extra like 75 Australian dollars. It just builds up. It's not great, and I guess 50 bucks can go a long way to other people. But overall, this is an amazing drone. Super fast, lightweight. You've got that great flight time. You've got super good maneuverability because the drone's so light. It's a pleasure to fly. All right, so now it is decision time. So we've already ruled out a Cinewhoop because they're lame. If you want to fly indoors, okay, you should get one, but they're lame. There's the build yourself custom drone option, which isn't great. It's expensive, don't recommend it. And now we've got these three drones that our godfather from FPV, Joshua Bardwell, has recommended. So if you want to save money and you've flown FPV for a while now and you're genuinely good, you're not gonna crash every 2 seconds, I would highly recommend the Roma F5 V2. The value for money on this drone just speaks for itself. It comes with a GPS, even the Evoke for the same price won't have that. It's just incredible value. I say that you should be at least intermediate because I don't think it's that durable. If you're a beginner and you, for example, dented a motor, you can tell because I switched it out there. If you dented it and you have to solder, you'd just be so down and you'd be like sad. But if you're a bit more pro, this is a great option for you. Maybe a second drone, third drone, who knows. If you are an absolute beginner and this is your first FPV drone, I would recommend the Nazgul Evoke. It's super solid option. This thing is durable AF. You're not going to be able to break any of these arms. They are super sturdy and thick. Basically very beginner proof, which is great. You could also go for a plain Nazgul, which is basically a cheaper version of this drone with everything stripped down. It does use slightly worse motors, but you won't be able to tell because you're a beginner. And honestly, I probably can't tell either, clearly shown on my past video. But buying a Nazgul as a beginner would be an amazing choice. So if you're someone looking for an 03 unit, which is the kind of next generation of the Calyx Vista, which is what we, I guess, normally use, then you should go for the GepRC Mark V. The main reason for that is the 03 unit is $570 US, whereas this retails for $600 US. And the reason I don't recommend the plain Nazgul V3 option that also has the 03 units is that that does not have a dead cat option. Dead cat frames are basically ones that look like this. Their arms are spread apart, so there's no props in frame. And that's very important when you have an 03 unit because it captures everything right there. If you flew this with an 03 unit, you're definitely going to see these props, so that's a consideration there. Long story short, the best option and the cheapest option available would be the GepRC Mark V with an 03 in the dead cat orientation. Alright, so the last category is basically if money didn't matter, I would buy the GepRC Mark V. It's got like a really premium feel and It just flies so well. It's really stripped back in terms of the weight, and it can pop really nice and just fly very nice overall. If I was actually spending my own money and I want to buy something out of the three, if I want an O3 drone, I would just go ahead and buy the Nazgul V3, which I'll put on the screen, mainly because it's so important to save money when you fly FPV, because these things crash, you don't want to waste extra money. And I don't really care if it has an X configuration because I always put a GoPro on anyway. If I was looking for a Caddx Vista version of these drones, I would probably just buy the Diatone F5 V2 because it's so cheap, the bang for the buck is incredible, and I can definitely fly well and get some bangers, which I have in the past. Overall, I hope this helped you. If it did, subscribe, leave a like, I appreciate that a ton. But let me just reiterate one more time, all three of these drones are amazing. If you're not too fussed about extra 20, extra 30, extra 50 bucks, just buy whatever you think is good in terms of the other elements. I've really weighted this on price because that's how good I believe these drones are. They are so comparable in that I would simply just pick the cheaper one. As long as you buy one of the three drones I mentioned in the last part of this video, you'll definitely be in good hands and you'll be flying some amazing FPV. Hope you enjoyed, and I'll catch you in the next one.